Stress is caused by a variety of factors: workplace issues, financial issues, family issues, or health issues in oneself or one's family. And often stress is caused by a combination of these factors. Some signs that someone might be feeling stress is that they're feeling fatigued or having some sleep disturbance. Some people also feel more physical symptoms like heart palpitations or an upset stomach. To manage stress, the best place to start is with taking care of your physical self so that you have the reserves to take care of your emotional needs. Taking care of your physical self involves things like getting good sleep, exercising, and eating healthy. The most important thing with eating when stressed is to avoid the normal pitfalls like turning to junk food or convenience foods. So better choices for healthy eating when stressed are choosing lots of fruits and vegetables and staying well hydrated. Exercise is the best thing people can do to help manage their stress. Unfortunately, it's often the first thing to go when people are feeling pressed for time or stressed. But reincorporating it can have a wide variety of benefits, including improved sleep, as well as an improved ability to cope. So adding back exercise, even at 20 minutes a day, ideally of cardiovascular exercise, can go a long way. A brisk walk a day for about 20 minutes is all it would take. When it comes to sleep, it's not just about quantity, it's also about quality. Ways to improve the quality of one's sleep beyond exercise are things like avoiding caffeine and alcohol late in the day. Other things people can try are going to bed the same time every night and waking up the same time every morning. The physical symptoms of stress can often mimic other mental health issues, such as the early signs of an anxiety disorder or major depression. If you're experiencing these symptoms for more than 2 weeks and they're impacting your day-to-day life, please speak with your healthcare provider.
Maybe you've heard the phrase, the best defense is a good offense. Major Catherine Baker is Chief of Army Public Health Nursing, and she couldn't agree more.
When you get the flu vaccine, whether it's the FluMist or the injectable, it protects you against the flu for that year.
This year, the vaccine comes in the traditional injectable or a nasal mist.
As we put it in, you just sniff, you just breathe normally, and that is it. It's painless. You may have a little achiness, maybe a little fever, and you just take Motrin or Tylenol, whatever your doctor would normally order for you or offer.
ID card holders and dependents can build a good defense this year thanks to numerous flu shot events around the Kaiserslautern military community. Senior Airman Ben Burgess, Rhine Ordnance Barracks, Germany.
Choosing a method of birth control is a really important decision for women. And the method that a woman will choose when she's 16 is often not the same as what she's going to choose when she's 40. One of the things I think to keep in mind when you're thinking about birth control is what's important to me right now and what are my plans for pregnancy in the future. Those are two important things that can help guide your choice. The main thing that most women want out of their birth control is effectiveness. They want it to work. If it doesn't work, then there's no point in using it. But secondly, there's a number of other considerations. A woman may want to use birth control for a period of 10 years, or she may never want to ever get pregnant again, so she wants a permanent method of birth control, whereas someone who's 16, looking ahead 2 years is a long period of time. So there's a lot of different decisions around making choices that have to do with a woman's own personal perspective. Secondly, what are your feelings about different methods of birth control? It's important to get all the facts so that you can make a really informed choice around what's going to work for you in the lifestyle that you live. For instance, if you have a really difficult schedule, you're up late at night, you're up early in the morning, you're traveling a lot, etc., and you can't remember to take a birth control pill, the birth control pill may not be your best option. It's one that's unlikely to work well for you if you can't remember to take it. So it's multifactorial. One decision is probably not right for you for your whole life. You'll want to rethink that throughout your life. And it's important to keep the dialogue open with your healthcare provider to get new information and discuss it on an ongoing basis.
No, they're not really. There's really just a narrow circumstance when condoms are sufficient for pregnancy prevention, and that would be under perfect use in a short time frame. So typically when we think about contraceptive pregnancy rates, we look at perfect use and typical use. Perfect use, you're using it consistently, you're using it correctly, and so you're doing it consistently, correctly every single time. Typical use is what happens in the real world. So you get just a mix of everybody, people that use it perfectly, people that don't use it consistently. But as far as the scope of condoms working well, it would only be in perfect use, which the annual pregnancy rate for condoms under perfect use is 2%. So using it under perfect use and in a narrow time frame, because even under perfect use, when you're using condoms as your primary method over a longer time period, it's not, your risk of a pregnancy isn't 2% anymore. So when you're adding years to this, and say you have, you're rolling a die and the probability of getting a pregnancy is 1 in 50, well, over say 10 or 20 years, you're not rolling that die one time, you're rolling 10 or 20 die, and you're hoping that over that time period, it doesn't turn up pregnancy. So it's not just 1 in 50 anymore. And the picture becomes a bit more dismal when we're talking about typical use, which is the real world. So typical use rates are what happen in practice. So the annual pregnancy rate for condoms under typical use is 18%. So that's a little worse than 1 in 6. So you can imagine rolling a 6-sided die and hoping that it doesn't come up pregnancy if you don't want a pregnancy. And that's just over 1 year. But people don't stop having sex after 1 year, and they don't become indifferent to unplanned pregnancies after 1 year. And so we're not rolling that die one time. I mean, we're rolling a collection of die, say 10 or 20, and we're hoping that none of them come up pregnancy. And that's asking a lot, and the condoms unfortunately don't deliver.
I never used to get the flu shot, and I actually came down with influenza 1 year.
It was 2 years ago that I got the flu, and I got it really bad.
I was, in my 30s. I was healthy, and I was completely incapacitated by the flu.
Couldn't breathe hardly, couldn't swallow, had a fever, 102, had to stay in the hospital.
Well, you don't want to go through what I went through.
Young people, old people, or people that are compromised in some way can die from it. It can be lethal.
I can't afford to get sick. I'm a single mom, so I just can't be out for a week.
I have a 9 and an 11-year-old, and I've always given them the flu shot because I think that's the best way to prevent the flu.
I have asthma and allergies, and my doctor highly recommends it so I could stay healthy.
I recommend to all my family and friends to get vaccinated because you never know if it's going to be a bad flu year.
I get the flu shot to protect myself and to protect my patients, as well as my daughter.
I'm pregnant, and I want to make sure that I protect my baby as well.
It's not really about yourself, it's about others too.
Sometimes you could transmit the virus even if you don't feel sick.
I get the flu shot every year.
I get it every year.
It's important to keep everybody safe.
Some women don't have much trouble with their painful periods, while others have so much pain that it negatively affects their quality of life, causing them to miss work or school. Menstrual cramps are often the result of uterine contractions. The uterine muscles contract to help shed the lining and to control the amount of bleeding. The contractions are triggered by hormones called prostaglandins. This process usually happens during ovulatory cycles when a woman has released a monthly egg. But painful periods can also be caused by secondary reasons such as medical conditions. One of the most common causes is endometriosis. But painful periods can also be caused by conditions such as adenomyosis, infections such as pelvic inflammatory disease, or structural abnormalities such as polyps or fibroids. For treating menstrual cramps, over-the-counter medications are a great place to start. These include acetaminophen, in addition to anti-inflammatory medications such as ibuprofen or naproxen. Anti-inflammatories help because they actually block the production of prostaglandins, which trigger the uterine contractions that cause the pain. Women can start taking over-the-counter medications as soon as they have any cramping, even before their period starts. Starting the medication early can decrease the pain as well as decrease bleeding. Some studies have found that women often do not take enough over-the-counter medications for them to be effective. Read the label to find the recommended dose as well as the suggested timing of doses. If over-the-counter pain medications haven't helped, a doctor can recommend other options. The birth control pill, patch, or ring help to control cramps because they control the menstrual cycle. They suppress ovulation, decrease the amount of bleeding, and decrease the production of prostaglandins. Hormonal contraceptives, as well as the progesterone intrauterine system, or IUD, can help suppress endometriosis and decrease bleeding. That's the first-line treatment for endometriosis, but some cases may require surgery. Structural causes such as fibroids may also require surgery. Lifestyle modifications may also help to manage painful periods. Research has shown that exercising 3 times per week can decrease menstrual pain and also improve mood and stress levels. In contrast, smoking has been linked to increased menstrual pain. So the modifiable things that women can do to improve painful periods include exercising regularly and not smoking.
Before you go here, go here. Know the facts first.
Pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, is an HIV prevention strategy where an HIV-negative person takes a daily pill to reduce their risk of contracting HIV. It's important to note that PrEP is not the same as PEP, or post-exposure prophylaxis, which is a month-long treatment regimen given to individuals within 72 hours after exposure to HIV to prevent infection from taking hold. The only currently approved PrEP regimen is Truvada, a 2-drug combo, which blocks an enzyme called HIV reverse transcriptase. HIV relies on this enzyme to make new copies of itself, so Truvada prevents the HIV virus from multiplying and establishing infection in the body. Because PrEP blocks an HIV enzyme, it protects against HIV infection, but it does not prevent against pregnancy or other sexually transmitted infections, or STIs. Therefore, people taking PrEP should also get regular HIV testing to make sure they haven't been recently infected, as well as STI testing and treatment if necessary. PrEP has been proven to reduce the risk of HIV infection in gay and bisexual men, transgender women, and heterosexual men and women, as well as people who inject drugs. PrEP does not treat HIV. It's meant to prevent HIV from establishing infection, so it should not be taken by someone who already has HIV. People who want to start PrEP must first be tested for HIV infection. PrEP has made a lot of headlines over the last 2 years, and the messages haven't always been clear. Let's look at 3 myths about PrEP and see what the facts really are. Myth number 1. PrEP doesn't work. In the large IPREX study of PrEP in gay and bisexual men and transgender women, researchers found an overall 42% reduction in HIV transmission. However, when the researchers looked at levels of Truvada in blood samples, they found that for people who took 4 PrEP pills per week, protection was approximately 96%. For people who took PrEP daily as directed, protection was estimated at more than 99%. So the take-home message, PrEP works if you take it as prescribed, every day. Myth number 2. PrEP causes bad side effects. Some people in PrEP studies have reported side effects such as nausea, headaches, or weight loss in the first few weeks of taking PrEP. Most of these side effects went away on their own or when PrEP was stopped, and the majority of people didn't have them at all. For example, one clinical trial reported moderate nausea only 22 times among the 1,251 people assigned to take PrEP over a study period of more than 2 years. A recent analysis showed that some people taking PrEP can have a slight increase in serum creatinine, an indicator of reduced kidney function, but these levels returned to normal after PrEP was stopped. Just to be safe, people who take PrEP should have regular monitoring for kidney health. Another analysis found a slight loss in bone mineral density in study participants taking PrEP, although this bone loss did not worsen with long-term use. Truvada was chosen for use as PrEP in part because it is safe and well tolerated. Like most drugs, some mild side effects are possible, but again, side effects reported with PrEP went away over time or when PrEP was stopped. Also, there are other drugs currently in clinical trials that may have fewer side effects. Myth number 3. PrEP is impossible to get. PrEP is available by prescription from doctors, nurse practitioners, and physician's assistants, and most healthcare plans cover PrEP. Without insurance, Truvada PrEP can cost upwards of $1,800 per month, but few people actually pay this full sticker price. There are medication assistance programs through Gilead Sciences that may be able to cover some or all of the costs of PrEP, whether or not you have insurance. Keep in mind that depending on how you are accessing PrEP, it may take several weeks to get your prescription filled the first time. Of course, PrEP is not the only way to prevent HIV infection. When used correctly and consistently, condoms are an important tool for reducing HIV risk, as well as preventing against other STIs and pregnancy. For people who do not use condoms every time they have sex, PrEP provides effective protection against HIV. The choice to use PrEP, like the choice to use condoms, is personal. The important thing is to find an HIV prevention strategy that works for you. This video has been provided to you by Eureka Science in collaboration with Beta of the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. To learn more about HIV treatment and prevention, visit Beta at betablog.org. Thank you for watching.
February has arrived, and with it comes the peak of flu season. But the season doesn't end till May, and a busy college campus like IUN offers the perfect opportunity to spread germs. The CDC suggests the following ways to reduce your chances of contracting and spreading the virus. 1. Practice proper cough and sneeze etiquette. 2. Wash your hands regularly. 3. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth. 4. If you get sick with flu-like illness, stay at home for at least 24 hours after your fever is gone. Following these steps will help to make this flu season a healthier one.
We explain the Zika virus. Vicky and Daniel are planning on visiting Brazil this summer for the Olympics. They are worried because the World Health Organization recently declared a public health emergency of international concern regarding the Zika virus. It is spreading rapidly in South America, and travel notices are in effect. Should Vicky and Daniel still visit Brazil? They decide to do some research to learn about the Zika virus. Zika is a flavivirus in the same family as yellow fever, dengue, West Nile, and chikungunya viruses. It reached Brazil last year and has spread to the Americas, Pacific Islands, and Africa. It is transmitted by Aedes mosquitoes, which contract Zika when feeding on an infected person. Experts believe the spike in Zika has a lot to do with climate change. Last year was one of the hottest years on record. The warmer the weather, the faster mosquitoes grow and reproduce. Plus, who can tell mosquitoes not to fly across borders? If infected, symptoms such as conjunctivitis, fever, and joint pain last several days, and the virus remains in the blood for about a week. Fortunately, severe infection requiring hospitalization is not common. So Daniel and Vicky wonder why Zika is causing a health emergency. Well, because of a possible correlation between the Zika virus in pregnant women and microcephaly in their babies. Microcephaly causes infants to have a smaller head than usual, typically as a result of incomplete brain development. The number of infants with microcephaly in Brazil has dramatically increased since the spike in Zika virus. Vicky and Daniel are not planning on having a baby anytime soon, but they can spread Zika to others if they become infected. They don't want to contribute to another outbreak abroad. Vicky and Daniel look into vaccines. There are none yet, but medical researchers are working hard to create one. If they decide to go to Brazil, they can prevent Zika by staying in air-conditioned areas, behind protective screens, and using bed nets. They should also stay fully clothed and use an environmentally friendly repellent when outside. If infected, staying inside for a week to prevent mosquito bites is recommended. And there's good news. Researchers are experimenting with genetically modified male mosquitoes. They may help stop the spread of Zika by passing a gene along to a female Aedes mosquito, causing offspring to die. Pesticides are also being sprayed, and standing water receptacles where mosquitoes breed are being emptied. Vicky and Daniel do in fact decide to visit Brazil for the Summer Olympics. They take precaution, are proactive, and have a wonderful time. We recommend you do the same.
So depression is not the same thing as being sad or unhappy. Everyone's life has challenges. There are stresses and challenges we experience on a daily basis. There are losses and transitions that everyone goes through. When we talk about major depression, We're talking about a condition when someone's mood is low or they feel uninterested in things for more days than not over a sustained period of time, usually for at least 2 weeks. There are other symptoms. People with depression may experience difficulty sleeping, difficulty with their appetite, difficulty concentrating, have low energy. In serious situations, they'll have very negative thoughts about how other people feel about them and how they feel about the world. And people may have thoughts of not wanting to live anymore. Probably the most important thing to understand about depression is that a major depression is when it impacts their person's ability to function, it impacts their ability to work, it impacts their relationships. For people who have mild symptoms or moderate symptoms of depression, talk therapy and types of psychotherapies may help on their own. For people who have more serious symptoms of depression, they may also require medication treatment on top of talk therapies or even medication treatment on their own to get better. But the really important thing to know, help is available.
I think that, just as an overall effective strategy for managing your physical health, stress management, treating your mental health, we can't overemphasize the benefits of exercise. I think exercise should be part of a wellness program for all of us, and certainly it's a great stress management tool. It can help keep anxiety under control. It really forces us to think about ourselves sometimes, and often, especially as women, we prioritize everyone else above ourselves. And so if you make this me time something that you kind of do to prioritize your own health, I think that that can only be good. If you then make it be a family activity or something you do with friends, then even better. There's no such thing really as bad exercise as long as it's done in moderation. I think the best evidence for really treating mental illness is exercise. It increases your heart rate and increases your breathing rate. So whatever that is, again, if you can do those types of activities in groups, all the better, because then you're getting some companionship along with releasing endorphins and increasing serotonin. And so, a short, slow, leisurely walk around the block is certainly not bad, but I think if you want to really optimize the antidepressant type effects, go for a brisk walk with a friend.
A healthy meal begins with assembling a healthy plate. And before you bring anything to that plate, it might be worthwhile to buy a set of smaller dinner plates, cups, and glasses. Interestingly, many hardware stores sell these very inexpensively, but they're harder to find in fancy kitchen stores, mostly because small plates have gone out of style.
One of the reasons we like to obsess about nutrients, and the industry likes to obsess about nutrients, it's a way of distracting us from the quantities of food we're eating, and we are eating more. I mean, the supersizing has made plate sizes bigger, soda sizes are bigger. I mean, the portions from when I was a kid have been doubled, and the bigger the portion, the more you will eat.
So size matters when it comes to your plate, but once you've found a reasonably sized plate, the first step in constructing the meal should be deciding, what is my vegetable component of this meal going to be? We tend to start by thinking about the protein when we're planning a meal. If we can think of the vegetables as the feature, then the entire meal will likely end up being healthier. The plate itself should consist of about 1/2 plant-based food, ideally with a mix of different colored vegetables. Different colored vegetables contain different micronutrients, so eating a variety of them maximizes our nutrient coverage. In general, eating a variety of foods is also beneficial because it minimizes the chances of getting sick from potential contaminants in any one food. The remaining 1/2 of the plate should be equally divided into whole grains and lean, protein-rich foods. These foods can come from animal sources or plant sources, but again, variety is good. Eating chicken every night of the week is almost certainly not the best way to stay healthy. or excited about your next meal. Most of the time, the best drink to quench thirst and keep us hydrated and healthy is plain, clean water. The human body is made up of more than 50% water, so don't forget to replace it during mealtime. Drinking water before each meal may even be helpful for weight management. The variations are endless, but getting into the habit of creating a healthy plate, sitting down for meal times, and taking time to enjoy our meals, these are the pearls of wisdom our great-grandmothers wore every day.
Dealing with any kind of illness is challenging, but people with mental illness have the additional challenge of having to deal with stigma. And there are a lot of misconceptions about mental illness. We think about mental illness differently from physical illness, as though it is the person's responsibility for the illness. Mental illness is not a choice in the same way that having cancer is not a choice. Mental illness is not a character flaw in the same way that having arthritis is not a character flaw. Mental illness is not something you can snap out of in the same way that you can't snap out of having diabetes. But stigma isn't only about how others view people with mental illness. It also affects how people view themselves if they're suffering, dealing with mental illness. Incorporating the views of society can lead people to feel shame, self-blame, and result in isolation. This can lead to people not seeking the help that they need and therefore not getting the care that they need. Stigma becomes a barrier to diagnosis, treatment, and social support. One way to challenge stigma is to educate people about mental illness. In Canada, more than 1 in 5 people suffer from mental illness. Mental illness can occur because of biochemical problems, or it can occur as a result of some external event, such as psychological trauma. Mental illness does not discriminate. It affects everybody, all kinds of people. This means that nearly all of us know someone who is struggling with a mental illness, whether it be a family member, a friend, a colleague. Challenging the stigma of mental illness means that those important people in our lives will get the help and support they need.
How do I know if my bag of M&Ms is fair? First, I have to decide what fair means, but since I guess I'm the one asking the question, that's pretty easy. I think a bag of M&Ms is fair if it contains an equal number of all the different colors. A bag is unfair if it has too many or too few of any particular colors. Next, we're going to have to decide how we're going to measure this bag. And there's a pretty straightforward method for doing this. I'll pour out all the M&Ms onto my desk, and I'll group them by color. When I'm done, I'll compare the number of M&Ms in each group. It looks like they're about equal, which means that this bag is fair. Awesome, hooray! Let's do another one, and this time I'm going to learn from my mistakes. Instead of pouring them all out onto the desk, I got these nice little bins that I can throw each color into to keep them from rolling around. That'll make it much easier to gather them all into groups. So I'm done sorting the second bag, mostly, but I have a problem. There are these two colors of M&Ms that I've never seen before. I'm not sure where they came from, but they're in the bag, and they have the little M on them and everything. I'm running out of containers, so I guess I'll just leave them in here for now. But let's count the other ones up. It looks like we've got pretty equal numbers of orange, red, yellow, blue, green, and brown. But what about those other ones? There's only like 7 of them, which, you know, isn't that much different from the rest, but it's not really fair to count them as the same color, right? Because they're not. So, okay, we have 3 tan ones and 4 white ones, and obviously this bag isn't fair at all. Wait, what about that first bag? There weren't any white or tan M&Ms in that bag at all. We thought it was fair when we counted it the first time, but it's actually even worse than this one. What do we do? If we keep discovering new colors of M&Ms, how are we ever supposed to know whether any given bag is fair? If we find out tomorrow that there are actually tons of purple M&Ms out there and we've just never seen one, does that mean that we've been enjoying unfair bags of candy all along? At this point, you may have guessed that this video is not actually about M&Ms. It's about fairness. It's about what happens when we make assumptions that make it difficult for us to see whether a situation is fair or whether it just looks like it's fair because we don't know any better. This has come up a lot in my life recently in the form of survey questions, particularly ones asking about sensitive topics like ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender identity, which is what I'm going to focus on. These surveys often claim that their goal is to achieve or to maintain diversity, to make sure that a particular organization or group is treating its members fairly. However, all too often, these questions look like this. And this is understandable. Just like lots of you have probably never seen a white M&M before, lots of people just aren't very familiar with the idea that not everyone falls into one of the convenient checkboxes of male and female. In the last few years, transgender and non-binary people have become more visible than ever before. Some people aren't comfortable with that idea, and that's okay. There are lots of things that make me uncomfortable, like spiders, but it's not the spider's fault that they creep me out. I can't pretend that they don't exist, and I certainly don't think it's fair of me to squish them on sight just because I don't understand them. It has become very clear that gender is not a binary. The bins that we've set up to categorize people into one gender or another were created by a world that assumed there were only 2 genders, by people who had probably never even heard of a trans or non-binary person. Now that we realize gender is more of a spectrum than a multiple choice question, these bins just aren't good enough anymore. It's not just insulting to people who don't identify as male or female, it's actively preventing us from seeing and understanding the diversity that already exists in our communities. If you ask a question like this, how do you expect to ever find out how many people you're ignoring for the sake of convenience? How will people tell you that you've missed them if their only options are to lie about their gender identity or to stay silent? The funny thing is, there's an easy solution to all of this. Just throw out the bins. Just like we can't assume we already have bins for every possible color of M&M when we open a new bag, we can't assume we already know all possible gender identities of the people we're surveying. Because if we did, we wouldn't really need to survey them in the first place. If you want to ask what someone's gender identity is on a survey, you should be prepared for them to tell you anything they want. Because that's how gender identity works. Everyone gets to choose. But before you panic about how hard it would be to process a survey where everybody gets to write in their own free-form answer, let's go back to candy for a minute. Clearly we need better candy sorting methodology. We can't just assume there will always be 6 convenient colors to sort the M&Ms into, but how can we count them efficiently if we don't know how many bins to use? This is where the magic of technology comes in. It turns out computers are actually really good at determining whether 2 things are functionally identical, in this case, 2 M&Ms. I can write a computer program that will go through every single one, making a list of every different sort of M&M that it finds and keeping track of how many there were of each type. What I get out of that process is a lot more manageable, a dozen or so unique types, each of which has a number telling me how many of it the computer found. Why are there more types than colors? Well, the computer noticed something I didn't. Some of these M&Ms have peanuts in them, and some of them have peanut butter in them, so they're not really identical to one another. But remember how we defined what makes a bag of M&Ms fair, though? We care about color, not filling. All we need to do is group the unique types of M&Ms by color, and then add up the number of times the computer counted each type in each group. That tells us how many of each color were in the bag. No bins required. Finally, we can say that, to the best of our knowledge, our bag is fair. And maybe tomorrow we'll find out that purple M&Ms are a thing, and we'll realize we've been missing them all along, but that's okay. We can change our categories. We can add new ones. We can notice our mistakes and try to do better. And that, I think, is what fairness is actually about.
What percent of high school athletes have used or have experimented with roids?
Some athletes may appear to achieve physical gains from such drugs, but at what cost?
Steroids is a form of cheating, plain and simple. Instead of roids, hard work and a proper diet is the way to go.
Steroids can cause infertility, so say goodbye to your future children.
In the long run, you're gonna lose more than you gain.
Steroids can cause tendonitis and tendon rupture, so say goodbye to your athletic career.
People who take steroids have a higher chance of liver failure, heart attack, and stroke.
100. And that's why I avoid the roids.
This is why I avoid the roids.
Avoid the roids.
Avoid the roids. For more information, go to avoidtheroids.com.
Opiate abuse, and especially heroin abuse today, are active in every single neighborhood and community in Northeast Ohio. Heroin is available in rural areas, it's available in suburbs, it's available in cities. Heroin affects everyone. It's our obligation as friends, as family, as parents, and as concerned citizens to push people to get help.
So, this is a friend of mine that I took a photo of a couple weeks ago. When she saw the photo on the back of her camera, she immediately was like, I don't like it. Would you please erase it? She was like, Duncan, please, oh my God, erase it, kill it. And of course, I was like, why? Because, look, I mean, there's nothing wrong with this image. Turns out, I think what was wrong was her perception of the image. So let me dive into this a little bit. As a photographer for TED and other places, I have seen this time and time again. We've seen people see photos of themselves, say, oh, I don't like that for whatever reason, but everybody else in the room will like it. Well, I dug into this a little bit. I talked to lots of the scientists that I have access to, thankfully, and started asking questions. Now, we know from perceptual science that a lot of what we actually perceive the world to be is pulled from memory, right? When you look at the TED logo, you glance at it, you know what the TED logo looks like because you've probably seen it a dozen times. Something pulls out of memory, that's what you perceive, right? Now, let's think about ourselves. How do we perceive ourselves? What is the map that we use to view ourselves? Well, it's like what no other camera sees. It's a mirror in your bathroom at arm's length, reversed. So that's a very personal view. You're the only person that has this view in the world, right? Whenever somebody takes a photo of you, it does not match that. In fact, I would go so far as to say you fall into the uncanny valley. So what's the uncanny valley? Well, this is something that the Hollywood folks would know well. So if you've ever seen Toy Story, right, the character Woody, you know, he's human-esque, but he's not too human, and we accept him as a character. He's funny, he's great. He's Tom Hanks' voice coming out. Well, Tom Hanks lent his voice to another character, the guy in Polar Express. Well, that character was so closely rendered to be a human that something in our brain kicks into overdrive, and we look at him and discriminate him a little bit more carefully than we do Woody. And all of a sudden, he's not quite right. He's not quite human. He's not quite real. And to some people, he even looked a little dead, right? So my theory, though I'm not a scientist, I'm just a photographer, is that when we see a photograph of ourselves, it looks almost right, but not quite. And so therefore, we feel a big sense of rejection. Is the theory right or not? We'll see. Maybe somebody will test this. But what I can do right now is tell you one thing. If you see a photograph of yourself, you have that reaction that, I don't quite like this, but everybody around you says it's a great photograph, trust your friends. They know what you look like more than you do.
"14 years ago, I was in art school, and this is the straightest line I could draw. This was doomsday. This is the destruction of my dream of becoming an artist. Today, this is the straightest line I can draw." So nothing's changed, right? Except that everything has changed. The shake developed out of a single-minded pursuit of pointillism, just years of making tiny dots. I'd hold the pen tighter, and the dots used to look like dots, and then they eventually looked like tadpoles. And so I would continue to hold the pen tighter, and my hand would still shake, and I'd hold the pen tighter still. And this eventually caused so much pain and joint issues, I had trouble holding anything. I left art school, and then I left art completely. A few years later, I just couldn't stay away from art. I got back into it, and I went to a neurologist this time to have the shake checked out. And I was quickly diagnosed with permanent nerve damage. And he took one look at my squiggly line and said, "Well, why don't you just embrace the shake?" So I did. I went home and grabbed a pencil and just started letting my hands shake, and I started making all these scribble pictures. And it felt great, even if it wasn't the art I was passionate about. But once I embraced the shake, I realized I could still make art. I just had to find a different approach to making the art that I wanted. So I began experimenting with different methods where the shake wouldn't affect the work. And I discovered if I worked on a larger scale with different materials, my hand wouldn't really hurt. I went from having a single approach to art to an approach to creativity that has just completely changed my artistic horizons. This was the first time that I realized embracing a limitation can actually drive creativity. And I wondered, could you become more creative then by looking for limitations? What if instead of painting on a canvas, I could only paint on my chest? Or what if instead of painting with a brush, I could only paint with karate chops? Or what if instead of making art to display on a wall, I had to destroy it? This destruction idea turned into a year-long project I called Goodbye Art, where each and every piece of art was destroyed after its creation. By limiting my theme to destruction, I let go of the tangible outcome and saw new possibilities where art didn't have to be tangible or serious or permanent. In the beginning, I focused on forced destruction, like this image of Jimi Hendrix made with over 7,000 matches. It burned in 1 minute. And then I opened it up to new things where art was destroyed by itself. I looked for temporary materials like Oreo filling, spitting out food, Cheese Whiz, or frozen wine. The last iteration of destruction was to produce something that never actually existed in the first place. So I laid candles out on a table, and I lit them, and I blew them out, and I repeated this process over and over with the same set of candles. Then I took the videos and assembled them into the larger image. So the end image never actually existed as a physical whole. It was destroyed before it ever existed. The destruction riff opened up a whole new phase of creativity for me. Now when I run into a barrier or I find myself creatively stumped, I move from frustration to anticipation really quickly because I know something amazing might come of it. We live in pretty unpredictable times, and our ability to create is the most powerful tool we have to attain security. Limitations may be the most unlikely of places to harness creativity, but perhaps one of the best ways to get ourselves out of ruts, rethink categories, and challenge accepted norms. And instead of telling each other to seize the day, maybe we need to remind ourselves every day to seize the limitation. Thank you.
Families come in all sizes and shapes. Sometimes your friends are your family by choice, or sometimes you're just stuck with Uncle Charles. But what we know is that you want to protect the people that are close to you, but the flu can unravel everything. Your flu vaccine protects you and your family. No matter what draws your family together, protect yourself, protect your family. Everyone needs a flu vaccine.
Let's face it, heroin
is killing us. Destroying the lives of users.
Families.
No one wakes up one day wanting to be an addict.
Addiction can start anytime, anywhere.
Probably at home.
In your medicine cabinet.
Heroin is easy to get.
It's extremely addictive.
Heroin's different.
It doesn't let go.
Let go.
You'll do anything.
Anything for heroin.
Let's face it. Let's face it.
It's real, and it's up to us to stop it.
Save your life or one that you care about. Go to letsfaceheroin.com.
There's just something about the speed and simplicity, but that speed and simplicity can be deceiving when you get behind the wheel. 20-year-old Emmy sent this text message to her boyfriend. I love you too, and I'll try to make you happy. Moments later, Emmy was killed when her car slammed into the back of a tractor trailer. 18-year-old Taylor was also texting when her car slammed into a truck at 80 miles per hour. Her final text? Driving and Facebooking is not safe. Ha ha. You probably think that these things could never happen to you. You're not alone. 55% of young adult drivers say it's easy to text and drive. 3/4 of the same young adult drivers feel confident that they are really good at texting behind the wheel. The reality is they are all delusional, and so are you. Drivers who text spend about 10% of their driving time outside their own driving lanes. That quick look at your phone takes longer than you think, 5 seconds or longer. If that doesn't sound like much, imagine you're driving down the road and someone covers your eyes for 5 quick seconds, like this. You'd probably feel very lucky if you didn't crash, but you choose to take your eyes off the road just like that every time you read or send a text. Texting and driving has now become the leading cause of teen driver death, surpassing even drinking and driving. But if you think dying in a car crash is the worst thing that can happen to you, it's not. You could survive after you kill someone else. Imagine spending the rest of your life knowing you killed someone for a text message. Now imagine knowing you killed someone for a text message while you're in prison, because that's what's starting to happen all over the country. Still think it will never happen to you? Still think you're the special one? That's what Aaron thought right before he killed a father of 3. Aaron is one of a growing number of texting drivers who are going to jail. There's another growing group of young people that you should be a part of. Ones who have pledged not to text when they drive. Leave your cell phone alone when you're driving. If you absolutely must send a text, pull off the road or into a parking lot. Anywhere it is safe to use your phone. No text is so important that it's worth your life or someone else's. You aren't different, you aren't special, you're just another accident waiting to happen. Don't text and drive.